Hello, and welcome to another episode from Season 6 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a passion for scary movies. Each week we pick a different horror movie and dissect it to figure out what it was trying to accomplish, how well it did, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season we're changing things up. We're devoting a whole season to reviewing Esquire's list of the 50 scariest movies of all time. In each episode, we'll break down a different movie, talk about how scary it really was, and then update our rankings to prove how much smarter we are than the other people on the internet. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the conversation. In college, I took a class called Philosophy in Film. And every week we'd go over some famous philosopher and then hit the highlights of their work. And then our homework was to watch a movie and write a reaction paper about how you saw that philosophy in the movie. And one of the movies was Night of the Hunter.
Oh.
But I cannot for the life of me remember what philosopher was supposed to be relevant to it.
Really?
Yeah. So I know I wrote a paper about it, but I couldn't find it. That was on an old laptop that I don't have anymore. But because back in the day, you had a file, and the file was saved on your hard drive. So if anything happened to that computer, it was just gone forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good old days.
Life was tough, kids.
Yeah.
But I do think that good and evil were obviously a really big part of this movie. And since it took place in rural America in the 50s, religion was also a big part of it. And you combine those things, throw in some evil and violence, and baby, you got yourself a horror movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the film was placed in the Great Depression, but it was filmed in the 50s. Is that what you mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, just because it was made in the 50s,
gotcha.
Like the religion was a big part of how good and evil stuff was presented. Yeah. So
yeah.
But yeah, so it was an interesting one. Had you seen this movie before or even heard of it?
No, neither one.
Cool.
But I remember when we were going through the list, we talked about that's one I'm intrigued by.
Yeah.
Because it has Robert Mitchum in it.
Yeah.
And he's in one of my favorite John Wayne movies. So
yeah. Well, and I feel like the love and hate knuckle tattoos are pretty iconic as well, which is cool.
Very.
So, yeah.
I mean, for sure for the time, 50s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I'll introduce it, and then we'll get down to business.
Do we?
In 1955, United Artists released The Night of the Hunter, directed by Charles Laughton and starring Robert Mitchum. This movie tells the story of a self-appointed preacher with dark motives who arrives in a small town and sets to work marrying a widow so he can steal her ex's money. The Night of the Hunter was made on a budget of just under $800,000. Though it was not at all a success with either critics or audiences at the time, it has gained a positive reputation and was even added to the U.S. Library of Congress's National Film Registry in 1992. This movie can currently be rented for streaming on Amazon Prime Video. And I feel the need to clarify, because I feel like you're going to call me out on it one of these days, and I want you to know that I know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I basically say every movie can be rented for streaming on Amazon Prime Video. I give a heads up when something is free somewhere else, though. That's the point of that little part at the end. If I was able to find it for free somewhere else, I'll let you know. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to have to pay to rent it, I feel like people should know that.
Yeah, for sure go with Amazon. It's always $1 cheaper than iTunes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if you go to more purchase options. A lot of times you can rent it in SD, which most of these movies were filmed in. Mm-hmm. So it's $1 cheaper even on top of that.
Yeah.
But anyway, what did you learn about this movie?
So, Charles Laughton, or Laughton, just could be pronounced that way, right?
We just call him Mr. Director.
Mr. Director Idiot reportedly worked well with John, the kid.
Mm-hmm.
But when it came to Pearl, she's a bit difficult. Diva.
Kind of like the
5-year-old diva.
Kind of like the monkey in The Fly.
Yes, exactly. It was the exact same situation.
Yeah.
So anyway, so some of the shots that they got with her reaction and her crying was actually they were continuing filming, and he was kind of like yelling at her because I guess he didn't think that she was giving a good enough reaction at the time. Now, this is also 1955. Well,
you could hit children back then.
Yeah, and so like I kind of almost feel bad for him.
Yeah.
But anyway, so some of the crying may have been from yelling, may have not been. Okay, another fun, interesting fact. So there's a sequence where Pal is riding the horse, where he's riding a horse, and like a silhouette of him riding across the horizon. Supposedly, that was done with a little person on a little horse, on a pony.
Why?
I don't know, man.
Huh.
It was filmed in false perspective.
If
that means anything to anyone.
Okay.
Yeah. I could go in, but I'm not going to. Okay, so
you can't just leave me hanging like that.
So Robert Mitchum was very eager for the part of the preacher when he auditioned. A moment that particularly impressed Charles, Mr. Director Man, was when Mitchum described the character as diabolical shit. After Lawton promptly answered present. So that's what he was. He was a diabolical shit. Mr. Director Man also described this movie as a nightmarish sort of Mother Goose Tales, which I could kind of see.
Yeah.
One day, Robert Mitchum arrived on set drunk, and producer Paul Gregory told him that he was in no condition to work that day. Mitchum took umbrage to this and walked over to the producer's Cadillac, opened the front door, and urinated on the front seat.
I mean, we've all been there.
That was a badass move.
Total power move.
Probably not true either.
Yeah.
I guess. Let's see. Okay. So, here's the thing. The underwater shot.
Yes.
Of the character of Shelley Winters. The corpse in the Ford. Apparently it was like super convincing, but that was done like where he thought that was Shelley Winters underwater holding her breath, but it was actually a dummy.
I actually wondered about that.
I thought it looked real realistic.
It looked very realistic, but
yeah.
I don't think a person could hold their breath that long. So
right.
I figured it had to have been, but yeah, they did a good job with it.
Yeah, I was very surprised with that, considering just the 50s. Okay, so the last fact I have for this is Lillian Gish feared that Charles, Mr. Director Man, and Robert Mitchum might be undercutting Powell's evil. Mr. Director Man explained to her, half joking, that he didn't want to ruin Mitchum's future career by pushing him to play total evil. Although the touches of humor in the character actually served to play up the preacher's ludicrous and haywire psychology, and Mitchum's borderline buffoonery makes the children escape and eventually triumph over him more plausible.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, it's also kind of, I mean, for me, it's like this, I feel like this is for sure an iconic film, and to think like that could have ruined his career if he played any worse of a character. He may not have been in El Dorado with John Wayne 10 years later.
True, and then where would we be?
I wouldn't be here.
Same.
Yeah. Anyway, so those are my facts.
Cool. So yeah, I guess like I had mentioned before, religious imagery was obviously a huge part of this movie. And it starts off with like the Sunday school heads floating in space, which I thought was an interesting directorial choice. But, they're saying a lot of things like judge not lest you be judged and beware false prophets. And then it kind of cuts to the kids playing hide and seek, and they find a corpse in a cellar. and then it flashes to, you see Harry Powell for the first time, and he's like driving away, and he's like talking to God as he drives and sort of justifying his own actions. So it's like he's praying, but he's saying, like, reinforcing his own things that he's doing. So it's not like a Lord help me be better. It's like a, basically thanks for allowing me to not have any rules and steal money. And so from the very beginning, you kind of get a feel for what he's going to be. But I felt like the movie really kind of had two types of horror, because in the beginning, for a lot of the movie, it was a more foreboding thing. Like, you knew he was bad from that initial scene, but the rest of the people on the screen didn't. And the way that he presented himself was very much like, oh, well, I'm a preacher. And in that time and place, that would be seen as like a thing you don't even question. Like, oh, well, this is a man of God. Obviously, we should trust him. Anything that he says is, he's thinking of our best interest. But then very quickly, the kids know that they're in danger. And you don't really know what he's going to do, but he's got everybody fooled. And he's, you're seeing this like more and more two-faced version of him. And so it's just this weird, like, what's going to happen sort of anxiety. And then after he kills the mom, it ends up being like just a straight up chase and escape type movie, where the kids are just fighting to survive, trying to get away from him. But, he's just constantly there. So I thought that was really interesting for a movie from the 50s, in that it really was kind of two types of horror movie in the same one.
Yeah, it kind of made sense as far as the horror goes, of him being able to constantly kind of be there.
Yeah.
It made sense because they were in a little boat, and you can only really travel down water, with that, and downriver. And so it kind of worked out. Like this, I was really surprised with this, because, the movie starts off with their dad going to prison, or going to jail, making the promise and stuff. And it's just like, gosh, that's probably pretty rough on those kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then
it'll get worse.
And then like you think that's like the worst part. Since I had never seen it before, I was thinking that's the worst part, and then you're like, oh no, Harry Powell murders their mother, Willa.
Yeah. Well, and the dad gets executed. So
he's hung, and like the kids laugh about it.
Yeah, the other kids at the school. Yeah, that was brutal, but.
Intense. This was definitely intense. I think with the like filming and stuff, I don't know this for sure, because I'm not a film student, but I think that they were doing a lot of like I felt like I saw more different shots with this. Like
well, it looked like there was one from a helicopter or a plane a couple of times, which really surprised me. I wasn't expecting that from a movie this old.
Right. And it was like some of the stuff they did with the lighting.
Oh yeah.
Turning on, and like when Harry kills Willa, like it looks. I don't know. It looks like a set, almost like a play, but just the way it's kind of set up. He reaches up to the sky, and it's shot from a side angle, and it was really Like I was really impressed with it.
Yeah, and like. This is an older movie. It definitely didn't have the same level of like plot complexity as you'd expect today, and the technology and special effects and everything were less advanced than modern movies. And like it was in black and white, but there were a couple of things they did that I found really creative and interesting that made it work. Like, it wasn't a perfect movie by any means, and it's hard to feel like really scared by it, just because by today's standards it looks so dated. Mm-hmm. But I think it did do a lot of good stuff and a lot of interesting stuff. And for me, the whole movie really revolved around Harry Powell's character and the way that it was acted, and the way that the movie presented him.
Yeah, I can see it for sure. I think it was partial, like, so it was also like one of the first movies where Harry played like a crazy guy who thought he was speaking to God.
Yeah.
That was just using that alone in the 50s, it really trips me out.
Yeah, well, and he was a complicated character. He wasn't just like one thing, because he's talking about like the things that God hates, and then he says, like the frilly things with perfume. and then all of a sudden he's at a cabaret show, and then you see like the hate on his knuckles, and he's got the switchblade in his pocket, and then he's saying, talking to God, saying, "There are too many of them. I can't kill the world."
Yeah.
And you're just like, holy crap. And but you know, he could switch so quickly between, you know, talking to Willa or the other people in the town versus like talking to the children, and the way he could just sort of become like the likable preacher with his story
charming.
about love and hate versus, you know, like shaking John and telling him to show him where the money is. Like, just that switch that would flip is just creepy.
Yeah.
And then to include the idea of, you know, in his mind, I think he really thinks that God is empowering him to do all this stuff that he's doing.
Yeah.
And so it's not even like he's just using that to manipulate people. Like, he's deluded. And so that means he feels justified in anything that he does, which makes him even scarier, because obviously he's, you know, mentally unbalanced, but he's mentally unbalanced and thinks that he has God's backing for everything he does. And that's just like extra creepy.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that adds to it because he feels like he's justifying it. I think they did it really well where, like, with the whole knife thing too, where that was kind of like foreshadowing, like when he introduced it to Ben's dad. I can't remember his name, like in the prison cell. But I think the whole like charming thing for me, like the charm that he had and like the trance that he could put those people under, it was almost like a supernatural thing that he had going on, because like he did it to Willa, like where like she heard him try to shake Pearl down for money, and like she just was in bed and like shaking her head, or like got slapped and she was just continuing with it. It was real kind of confusing, but that wasn't the only time. Like he did that to who was it? Was it the Cooper? No, it was the Spoon.
Old lady at the store.
Icy Spoon was her name. They did kind of did it to her, and then he did it to like those peach farmers when he was searching for the kids like down the river. And it was just like he had this like charm trance that he could kind of put them in, and like you were afraid that he was going to do that to Miss Cooper. But no, she's a man of God.
Woman.
Be on, thought.
Yeah. Well, and I thought, so the movie did a lot of stuff to like play up his character with the way it was made. So, and I thought it was actually a little over the top with the "This is the bad guy" music playing every time he was on screen. But it was good how they did like the lighting on his face, and so the way that they would like set up the scenes around him. So there's that one when he first shows up at night and is standing outside the house that John and Pearl live in, kind of under the streetlight on the other side of the fence. And it almost reminded me of like a vampire type thing, like waiting to be invited in. But like you could just like feel the danger coming off of him. You know, like it just, something about the way that they set it up I thought was just perfect for making you appreciate how like dark and dangerous his character could be.
It was also real like he also had like this haunting thing, and it may have been helped that it was in black and white, but like when after, you know, you realize that Willa's gone and he comes back and he's outside just singing in front of the house, and it's almost like the taunt that he's doing. And
go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say it actually reminded me a lot of M, because he was singing that Everlasting Arms song like every time he was around. And then, you know, kind of like the whistling in M, where as soon as you hear it, you associate it with danger. And so as the movie goes on, it gets like more and more like anxious. And then, you know, it kind of ended like with the bad guy being cornered and going to trial and all that. But yeah, I was curious if this director, Mr. Director, had been influenced a lot by that movie, because it seemed like there were some similar things.
So another crazy thing about this director, real quick, that I want to bring up is I don't believe he directed again after this, because the movie technically flopped.
Yes, that I had read that as well. Like this movie did really, really badly and got really terrible reviews, and he was one and done on it. Yeah,
it's kind of sad, because I felt like if he continued, like there was some pretty cool ideas there. But
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think you know, I think that it's kind of cool for me. Like, one of the cool things about the podcast is that we're learning. We're watching not just mainstream horror movies that we're doing, and granted, this one came from the Esquire list, but like, you could definitely see so many influences, or how, like, before we started doing this podcast, you almost just kind of think, well, okay, I'm sure Halloween was like influenced by something, but it's probably taken from a whole bunch of different movies, which it was. But like, this one for sure had to, like, kind of spawn the idea of the guy who's just constantly, coming after you. You can't really do harm to him or get him out of it yet, or take him out. And it's just really kind of exciting to watch movies like this, because you're like, you see since we've watched a lot of the, not all, but a lot of the, mainstream horrors like Halloween and all those, it's kind of exciting, because you're like, oh, okay, 100% can see this,
like,
is
where some of the ideas and inspirations came from. Yeah.
Really kind of interesting.
Yeah. Also, if you ever marry a man, shifting topics here slightly, who doesn't want to have sex on your wedding night, that's a deal breaker, ladies.
Yeah. Oh, dang, man, I had some good questions for... Dang it.
What?
I'm going to ask you a question from that I meant to ask you last week. No, I won't.
Okay.
Do you think people really only have sex to have kids? Like, religious people? Do you think there's people out there that do that?
Well, I mean, a lot of Catholic people feel that way, right? Like, they don't believe in contraception and stuff.
I thought that they would. I mean, like, I thought when they don't believe in that, you just kind of chance it.
Well, yeah.
I never interpreted it as they were only doing it to have kids.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that, like, the Catholic Church specifically, and probably other religions or denominations as well, feel like that's like the ultimate goal of it. So
yeah, a bunch of. So this is how you know this dude's actually crazy.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't know before. Like, she walks in, and for the 50s, really, we're wearing some revealing clothing.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, no.
Yeah, he slut-shamed her.
Yeah. And he's like, do you plan on having a kid? Well, no. Then not dealing with your lust or whatever it was.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, you're dumb, dude.
Yeah. And also just super manipulative. Like, taking what's like a very healthy thing and then making her feel bad about it, which... is basically the story of our teenager years.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So, he was just a super creep, and that was kind of the thing that drove the movie and kept it interesting. Was just his character wasn't super predictable, and so, like, when he killed the wife, like, you weren't sure he was capable of doing that. You kind of thought, that he would be more subtle, but then he just, completely, without any real regret or anything, sees that as the step to get closer to the money, and then he does it, and then he comes back for the kids, and it's super scary. But yeah,
I mean, I think this movie had a lot to it. One of the things too is it's kind of interesting to think that like a single mother, a newly single mother, with two kids in the Great Depression, like, would be a prime target, you would think, for something like this. And now, there was definitely some humor aspects to it too, where like Harry Powell is trying to, like, he has Pearl on his lap, trying to get her to spill the beans about where the money is.
Yeah.
And John turns around and just clocks him with a brush.
Yeah.
And it just does that whole, like, kind of 50s thing where he goes like, don't, and like he kind of just looks confused.
Yeah.
But I guess that kind of brings up another subject for me, that the movie is so intense because that the movie's in the doll.
Yeah.
The doll's right there in his lap the whole time.
Yeah. And
he doesn't. It just makes it like, because you wonder, like, what's going to happen to these kids after he gets the money. Like, it's going to happen, But yeah, it's just it did I mean, this movie had a lot of good in it, where it was intense. There's some really intense parts. If you watch the preview of the movie, though, it makes it like it's for sure a horror movie when you watch the trailer for them for it.
Yeah.
It's like him like saying children while like they're down in the basement and stuff, and it's like, well, that's kind of how it happened, kind of not.
Yeah. The trailer maybe portrayed it as a little more straightforward horror than it was.
Yeah.
This movie did some weird stuff too. Like, aside from the humor, there were some decisions that I think were just strange. Like, when the kids are in the traveling down the river montage and they just show a bunch of animals at night.
Yeah.
For a really long time. Like, what? And then I feel like a place where this movie took a wrong turn was all the singing. I mean, like, let's just put in a song where people are singing. Why? What's that have to do with anything that's going on? This isn't Disney. Come on now. Know your market.
Do you think it was, do you think they did that because you can't really, there wasn't too much music that had good vocals?
Yeah, maybe so.
I would have just made the movie out of Robert Mitchum singing.
Yeah.
The man has a voice of an angel.
Yeah. Now, the one part where I did like the singing, though, was when the kids are at Mrs. Cooper's house towards the end, and Harry is sitting outside and Mrs. Cooper is inside with her shotgun. Yeah. And they're both singing the same song. And I thought that was really interesting because it shows, or at least the point I thought it was trying to make, is that you can kind of use religion for good or evil. You can use it for either manipulation or for motivation. You can use it as a thing to justify your actions, or a thing for bad, or justify, like, just being a good person and helping people that need help and stuff. And so I thought that with the theme, kind of the central theme of the movie being the whole good put next to evil and what those both look like, and sort of how interpretations of events versus motivations behind events and things, I thought that was a really good scene to kind of sum all of that up. But then my favorite scene in the whole movie was when she shot him. Yeah.
Well, so are you talking about where... Okay, yeah. Mine is, so my favorite scene is from when you realize that she's going to take up, like, when she believes those poor kids, that, that's not who he was. Like, you could tell, like, she was kind of suspicious, and then she runs in and gets a shotgun as he's chasing John under the house. And
like, she's not at all taken in by his story or his charm or anything. She sees right through all of it. Yeah.
Like, she's for sure the hero, of the movie. And then the cops come. But I think, so going back to the singing real quick, where they're both singing, one of the girls comes out and goes to Miss Cooper, and the light shines, and like Harry Powell disappears. Like, that for me was like the creepiest part of the movie, because he's now gone. They don't know where he's at. Yeah. Miss Cooper knows this. She actually says it, but so she gets him come down to the front room, or to the kitchen, and she's just pacing back and forth the whole house. Mm-hmm. And you realize, like, she's not this crazy lady who's, like, when you first meet her, like, she's gets a switch after John. Which my granny had done multiple times. It's just kind of funny, old school thinking. But anyway, so it was, this movie, you just felt bad for the kids. They lost both parents. They're on the chase from this guy who's trying to kill them. He's able to trick every single person into thinking he's good, except for this one person at the end, where shoots him, calls the police, and gets him arrested. Yeah,
it was like deeply satisfying. Very the way satisfying. That it ended, and normally with horror movies, that's not really the way it works. You just kind of walk away feeling like disturbed, or you see the serial killer fade away into the outback, or whatever. Like, it's not that nice resolved ending, but it was really satisfying in this one. But one thing too I noted about the ending is it was kind of like, and they all lived happily ever after and had a good Christmas together. So this movie is basically Home Alone, and Mrs. Cooper is the guy with the snow shovel.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it's definitely a Christmas horror movie. I'm gonna put it in my Christmas horror movie list.
Nice.
That was. Do you think she got the money?
That's
all I care about. Like, I don't care about the kids.
No, I think they probably, They probably just gave it back to wherever the dad stole it from,
This movie sucks. This movie's stupid.
Yeah. But the kids did end up like in a safe place at the end, so they at least had that going for them.
So 10,000 is basically the equivalent to 133,950.78 pounds today.
How many Australian dollars?
That would be
in 2005.
I figure the math. 2005. $4.
Oh, nice, not bad.
Yeah.
You could buy enough dingoes to feed a family with that.
Good.
More shrimps to toss on the Barbie. Have yourself a good Australian Christmas.
Yep.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
But the thing is, before we watch this one, so we've been watching a lot of like those detective murder shows,
like CSI.
Like real ones though. Like there's a channel on Apple TV. I don't know if it's on actual TV. It's called ID channel.
Okay.
And it's kind of like unsolved mysteries.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes they solve them. Sometimes it's like people calling in. So you hear like the people calling in and to 911, and then it's how they solve the murder or whatever happened. If it was a murder or whatever.
Yeah.
And real interesting stuff. It's real funny to watch a whole bunch of death stuff after Christmas.
Yeah.
But the one that I started as a joke was like murder in Amish country, thinking it was gonna be like one of the bad TV shows like the Amish Mafia.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's really interesting stuff of like how the police have to deal basically with like trying to solve something that if it happens with Amish and all that. But a couple of them revolved around guys killing it's all guys killing their wives. One was a kid. But it was like a lot of them like got mixed in the real world and had sex with, with whatever. One of them did it because his wife wouldn't give him blow jibbers. And it was like, oh, they don't even give that. And then I was like, but once you get married, those go away. But kind of felt bad for him. But so we were watching these, like the whole religious like things, and some of them were sexually motivated. And then I watched this, and he's talking about not wanting to have sex, and I was like, oh my god,
yeah,
this is a thing.
Yeah.
This one guy on there he was gay, moved to Austin. For the record,
an Amish guy?
Killed, yeah. And then the other guy got on the internet on some like hookup site, like Ashley. What is that? Something, whatever. Married people. Remember that got
Farmers Only.
Something like that, but it was
J-Date.
like Ashley.